And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and it is time for the MGoBlog Roundtable crew to come in like they do every Thursday at the 9 o'clock hour. Fellas, good morning. How are you? Start with Brian Cook. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah,
Hello.
man. It's a great morning, right? And of course, we don't have to talk about a loss. So Brian, much more chipper this morning. Seth Fisher, how you doing this morning?
I'm great. It's cornerback week in 2023 recruiting articles, and I just did Calhoun, which means you know who I'm on right now.
Yeah, hey man, look, and that's actually a really good segue. And of course, the venerable Craig Ross, how are you?
I'm very venerable this morning.
Well, you mentioned Cam Calhoun, and why don't we just start there? He didn't have an Ohio State offer. They're very quick to talk about who doesn't have an Ohio State offer. I had Rob Moran for the episode of Behind the Uniform that we're going to drop next week. That's a real thing, but it's a real flex. I mean, it's a weird flex because it's like, man, like Luke Hamilton said, have you seen their secondary lately? I know you guys saw him say that on Twitter, right? You saw him say that on Twitter. I know you did. And it's like the perfect reply to them talking about anything to do with development in the secondary.
Well, I mean, yeah, you didn't offer Rod Moore. Good job. Well done. You absolute yutzes. I mean, you chose Kyle McCord over JJ McCarthy. That's what your line is. It's like, okay, good job with that too. If the Ohio State spring game is any indication, where he's throwing multiple picks against that secondary, I don't know. I'm just like, you can't say it anymore. It used to be like, oh, he didn't have an offer for us and we beat Michigan all the time. I was like, bro, yeah, Luke Hamilton didn't have an offer from Ohio State. Look at the state of the offensive lines in this rivalry. Like, what is this telling you? It's not telling you anything except your scouting sucks.
Beyond that, Luke Hamilton also is he's sort of a focus for bringing kids together in the class. So it's not just that they lost out on a guy who I think is going to be a good football player at Michigan, but they lost out on the synergy that he brings in his own recruiting ability and his ability to sort of focus other kids in the class. So yeah, I mean, so what, you didn't offer him, like as Brian says, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna flex on any positions, I would think that secondary and offensive line would be the two you would avoid. Yeah, I mean, like almost any other position, baby. I mean, okay, but those two, you're gonna talk about.
I mean, the receivers are visiting their coach in the hospital right now, so they can't really be bothered.
I mean, well, they recruit receivers. Like, who can knock that? You can't even not talk about the recruit receivers, right?
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although Heartline does kind of keep on getting into accidents.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know about that.
Yeah. And they've got some more great guys coming in. But like you know, people from St. Ed's because it's a major program, and you ask St. Ed's who's the best player on the team. It's been Roebuck for a while. That guy's a monster. And then it's like, yeah, and we got the Twins. But like, Michigan was talking to the Twins, and Michigan has been on Roebuck like since the start, right? And I know that guys develop late and and things change. And I also do believe that the Twins are probably better fits at Ohio State because they pass more, and that's how they project. But like to come back and be like, hey, we've got the 2 4-stars and you've got the 3-star. That is not a representation of what's going on there.
Yeah, man. And look, I like those two good dudes. They've been by the studio. We interviewed them in the studio. We knew they were likely to wind up at Ohio State, but fit matters. And if the offensive line coach at the University of Michigan, who has had the best offensive line in the country the last 2 years, goes out and offers a couple of dudes and say they are great fits, I would say that is a pretty good endorsement or affirmation of their talent level. Talk about Luke Hamilton and Ben Roebuck. And you're right. Like if you talk to people about who's the best player right now, I think you're spot on. Are there good projections for the Armstrong twins? Absolutely. But I think Ben Roebuck's fit on this offensive line is prime. And what I like even more, you guys know me. I mean, I like a little edginess on my team. And I especially like my offensive line coming with that kind of mentality. I like that these guys are inviting the smoke. Any smoke Ohio State fans want to bring at them, or players or recruits, they're like, bring it on. We're ready for it. And they're coming back with some really clever barbs, which always goes a long way too.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's hard to complain about Michigan's offensive line recruiting. I mean, whether they've been highly rated, whether they've been 4 stars, whether they've been 3 stars, they mostly have worked out. And so what to me is most important is talent evaluation and what your staff is doing on talent evaluation and how they fit within your program. And to that extent, Michigan and Sharon Moore have done just fine. And the last 2 years, their offensive line has probably been as good as anyone's. Other people, outsiders who evaluate, think that. So, for Ohio State fans to say, oh, we didn't recruit Roebuck or we didn't recruit Luke Hamilton, as Brian says, well, congratulations, because I think they're going to be good players and they're going to fit in on what's going to continue to be the best this year. This is going to be, I would guess, the best offensive line in the country again, and it'll probably be next year too.
Yeah, so it'll be, and put it this way, I don't think that you'll see much drop off. It might not be Joe Moore award winning, but I kind of think that Joe Moore won't give him. He just won't give him the award
3 years in a row.
So they might perform as well or better, but there's just no way they win the award 3 years in a row. Hey, but guys, we sort of touched on this a little bit last week, but I want to bring it back up because Steve Clark said to me yesterday, he said, I heard you talking about Ryan Day being on the hot seat next year if he loses this year. He said, no, Sam, if he loses this year, this could be it for Ryan Day. Any of you guys buy that? You believe? I mean, remember, field goal away, has the number 2 recruiting class in the country. Everything's going well for them for the most part, except beating Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because it's a road game and Michigan looks very loaded this year. If Michigan's year goes the way that you would expect, they're probably rolling into that game with at most 1 loss. And honestly, I think that would be an upset. So I think he can probably get away with it. And then, if that happens, he would be coaching for his job in the shoe the next year. I think that's the timeline that makes the most sense for me.
That makes no sense to me at all, Sam. Just because how many games has the dude lost at Ohio State? In 3, 5, I don't know, none. I mean, almost none. I know that. And so for 1 game to define his entire career, it just seems like not a legitimate take. The guy's been completely successful. They recruit well. Like you say, Brian, they were within 1 kick of beating Georgia, in the national semis. So I just don't see how anyone could legitimately say that.
All right, so do this. Take all reason and logic and do away with it. Pretend you're an Ohio State fan. Now make that assessment of them losing the game this year and what.
I love Bush Light and wrestling.
You might as well ask me to pretend I'm J. Fred Muggs. I mean, I have no idea I grew up in Ohio.
I'm wearing an Andy Katzenmoyer jersey and pounding brewskis. Hey, I have no use for the written word.
That's my point exactly.
That's why Steve's point might have some merit. I mean, G. Smith came out and gave him a vote of confidence last week, right? He's my CEO, as if you have to say that about a guy who was a field goal away from the national championship game. I mean, I thought that was pretty telling, Seth.
I mean, he's also the guy who said Tressel fires him, not the other way around. So that
was true.
That was Gordon G.
That was Gordon. Oh yeah, that was
Gordon G. Yeah.
That was Gordon. Yeah, I get. Sorry, I got them confused. But I mean that's the way things work at Ohio State, and that's the thing. Like as long as the Ohio State coach is beating Michigan and winning, and winning games, that's the two, right? That they have two things on their platter: beat Michigan and win games, right? They don't always have to win the national championship, but you have to beat Michigan and you have to win a lot of games. The manner of next year's game could matter a lot. If Michigan comes in like one loss or no losses and wins at home because JJ's amazing and wins the Heisman, that's one thing. If JJ's injured and we beat them with throwing the ball 3 times or something, that I mean like the manner of it could be the manner of it matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you. Style points matter, and they especially matter, I think, in that game. But it's hard for me to imagine firing a coach who's been as successful as Ryan Day has been, and he has been incredibly successful, truly.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't see it.
Well, here is something to really look at to segue a bit. Gonna be great to see Sharon year 2 in the offense as a play caller, but now having the full play call sheet in front of him. Also gonna be good to see Jesse Minter in year 2. Brian, he was recently on the Inner Trenches podcast this week and went basically position group by position group and gave him really some revealing commentary on the state of the defense heading into the season.
Yeah, and obviously he calls out that second cornerback spot as the one big question mark. And he talks about Maury Walker, but he also talks about Jaden McBurrows, who is reputed to have a good spring. And people have been talking about him since he arrived, despite the fact that he's barely been healthy. So I think that's another guy who could emerge. And then we saw Will Johnson emerge midseason. And then your candidate this year for that appears to be Jair Hill, who I believe is Michigan's highest ranked corner in this recruiting class, and a guy who I think you personally thought was underrated, even though he got some pretty nice recruiting dap from the industry. So, I think that's definitely the question mark. And then, the other question mark for me is like, what does the pass rush look like? And so he's talking about Braden McGregor and Derek Moore at one of those end spots opposite Harrell and Josiah Stewart. And I think that was interesting because, if one of the end spots is like a platoon between those two guys, and then Harrell and Josiah Stewart are at the other spot, it kind of feels like the Harrell Stewart thing is a passing down, running down kind of platoon. And then I think that might be the case for the other spot too, where you might see McGregor be more of an every down guy, and then Moore come in as a pass rush specialist. But that's just speculation based on the fact that Moore's a little younger than Braden McGregor. But they just need, I think, one guy to emerge, because I think you're going to see Mason Graham really emerge as an interior pass rusher. And as we saw with Mo Hurst, that really does an awful lot for your defense if you can get pressure up the middle.
Yeah, man. Mason Graham, I don't know if you guys, I mean, his hands are enormous. I mean, so just can get rid of blockers, super explosive. I feel like you, Brian, and he's gonna take a big step this year. But I want to seize upon your point about Jay McBurrows, because one of the things that I've learned to do over the years is to kind of cross-reference. You hear the coaches say something, you want to know, are the players thinking the same thing, and vice versa. And Jay McBurrows is one of those guys that coaches and players are talking about. That's one of the guys that Rod Moore spent the majority of his time talking about. The other guys on the team, that's one of the guys, or the guy he spent the most time on, and saying, man, he's one of the biggest hitters on the team, which we have talked about. Mm-hmm. And then he said, I also think he's one of the best man cover guys on the team. He said, when I needed man coverage tips, he said, you talk to Will, you talk to Mikey. He said, Jaden McBurrows is up there in his man-to-man cover skills. And watching him in high school, I thought his man cover skills were really good. He's a guy who is an absolute thumper, so he can hit. I think he was the high school version of Antoine Winfield, right? So the question was top end foot speed, which I think that they've shown he has enough. And then the other is, the day-to-day. Rod Moore is a guy like Will Johnson who is going to live. They're going to be eat, sleep, drink, breathe, film study. They're going to be on that grind all the time. I think it's been more of a maturation process for the other guys. So can you apply the same kind of preparation that the guys that were playing earlier in their career applied? I think you're seeing Jade McBurrows be on that level now too.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to believe, at least by the middle of the season, that position won't look pretty good. I mean, you've got competition there with McBurrows, Walker, Jair Hill at least, and maybe somebody else. And it's just impossible for me to believe that position won't work its way out and be pretty good. So certainly in the first half of the year, you're not going to see teams come out and throw the ball in the direction of Will Johnson. So I think that position is going to get worked, and I think it's going to be by the middle of the year solid. Pass rush, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm optimistic about that, but we'll see what happens here. I mean, Brian's point is good because there's nothing better than an interior pass rush. If you can get some pass rush up the middle of the line, well, everything else is going to fall in place. So
no doubt. So Seth, I know you follow recruiting. Another thing that Rod said, he said, to tell me about some of the younger players. He said Jair Hill is going to play. Period. So we all agree. All the guys are saying it. Watching him just in spring ball, Jair Hill is going to play as a freshman. So
yeah, we do this thing, man. We're like, what's the most underrated recruit of the class? And like, it's hard to take the guy who's the top of the class. I don't know.
Well, we've always restricted that to 3 stars. So
it's got to be a 3-star. So I'm not allowed to do that guy.
You're not allowed to.
But right, but like the one who the biggest difference between where his ranking's at and the number I'm going to give him, that's probably the biggest one in the class. Him or Hewlett probably, just because like Hill, he was so locked in on Illinois and Michigan, I think, through the whole process. So like he wasn't being looked at by the South, and when you're not going to the national camps or making those national camps, they're not really talking about you. Like you need an Alabama and Georgia after you if you're going to be a 5-star. And like they also will never put a 5-star on a guy who's quote raw, but that is a problem. He is kind of raw. So I think that Minter is probably already looking at his guys and going, well, I've got players who can play a lot more man than I had last year. And and then I don't have 5th year and 4th year seniors. So I'm guessing they're probably just it's not going to be as complicated as it was last year. Because Will Johnson didn't get to play until halfway through the season last year because that defense, if you screw up your change, right? If like the guy goes deep and you're not supposed to go with him and you don't know that, then like that guy is just wide open downfield. And we saw that a couple times in the spring game where I think Saab missed one and Jair Hill missed one. So they have that to work on. But like if they can simplify the defense a little bit, they can probably access Jair Hill a lot more. And you can do that, when he's on the field at least. And that is athlete. My God, can that guy move? Denard on defense is what I was calling it.
Yeah, man. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. I don't we talked about Marion Walker some, and he said, man, he's just like what everyone says, he's a freaky athlete. Think it's like any prospect who is going to a position for the first time. There's going to be some growing pains, and we saw some of those in the spring game. When a guy has experience under his belt and talent like Jaden McBurrows, I think it's reasonable to kind of look at him as a guy who is going to be ahead of Marion Walker. I think that'll be a battle in the fall. I think both will play, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden's the guy, certainly at least to start the season there. You move up front, man. I thought in the spring game, Derek Moore was one of the guys who really flashed. I mean, he can play with speed, he can play with power. I just the combination that he brings to the table is, to me, the most intriguing of the. I mean, I like Josiah Stewart. I'm excited to see him, but I'm most excited about what Derek Moore could be this season.
Yeah, and his recruiting takes were all like, this guy is a flash upfield and he has size. And what he needs to do is he needs to refine what he's doing. And this is the year where you're going to find out how he's refined it. Because, he'd flash last year, but flashing is flashing and doing it, game in, game out is a completely different thing. And he's going from year 1 to year 2, a guy who is getting excellent coaching. And I think, like, if it wasn't for Mason Graham, he'd be the guy I was the most excited about seeing from that freshman class. Because I think Graham's just going to explode. And then you have Kenneth Grant on the interior, too, who's not going to be a pass rusher unless God has truly blessed us. But he looks like a guy who will also be a dude. And so you've got depth. I mean, we're talking about this defensive line, and we've already talked about 2 potential like excellent starters at both end spots. And then on the interior, you have Chris Jenkins coming back. You have Graham. You have Kenneth Grant. You have Rayshon Benny, who I thought flashed in time last year. So not only is this defensive line got a number of breakout candidates, but it has that depth. And I've always said that at those interior spots, you really need 1.5 starters, and it really looks like Michigan has that.
Here's a question.
Go ahead. I mean, doesn't it feel to you guys that this defense has a good chance of being better than last year's defense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you get both linebackers back. Yeah. So, and linebacker is the position on defense where I think experience counts for the most.
You get Hausman.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know how much Hausman and Hill Green are going to play, but they're too. Now all of a sudden you have a 2 deep, and you have Rolder, who played as a freshman too. So last year we were like, we don't have any linebackers, and this year, okay, well we've got a pretty decent shot at having some guys who can play. You get Partridge back, and linebacker play under Partridge is very good. And really, your secondary looks great except for that one spot. So you fill that one spot, and you get a couple of breakthroughs, and you got enough lottery tickets to expect that you are going to get 1 or 2. And yeah, you're looking at something that could be lights out.
Here's a question from the crowd, and it kind of fits in with what you were just saying. Question: do we hit the transfer portal for any position? Do you think the Wolverines are or should be shopping for any positions in the portal right now?
I mean, if there's an established college kicker who's a plus kicker, that's what I would look for.
Well, you saw that the Ohio State kicker left in the portal today or yesterday.
Really?
Their place kicker left and is in the portal. Now, I don't know if he's any good. I don't know if their place kicker could do anything, but he is out there as of today.
Well, we know he can kick extra points.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a good thought, Brian. But we don't know what Samaha can do. Menser looks to me like he'll be able to be a good, solid kicker on shorter stuff. I just don't know if we've got, we don't have a Moody type kicker at this point, probably.
No, but one thing that I have noticed across the league is that, I was irritated doing all these previews last year because nobody had a shaky kicker, not even Nebraska. And that's because Nebraska went out and got some guy from FCS. So, it feels like you don't really get a whole lot of data on kickers in high school, but then you do start getting a significant amount in college, and level doesn't matter, right? If the guy's kicking them, the guy's kicking them. Yeah. So, like, no disrespect to the guys Michigan has on the roster, but they sort of inherently haven't proved it yet. And I think that would be like the one thing I'd be like, okay, let's look around for that.
What about, we obviously talking about all the options at corner. If there's an experience, I haven't checked the portal here to even know if this is available, but if you have an experienced corner that you can grab or an experienced wideout, you gotta love where you are with Roman and CJ. You still have AJ. I know there was some talk about maybe with the portal with him, but he's still around. You got some young guys that you're really enthused by, but as much as they were talking about having a Marion Walker go both ways, I wonder when that will really manifest. I think he's probably gonna have to get his feet really planted firmly on the ground at corner before you start counting on him to come back to the other side of the ball. So do you think it'd be prudent to be looking receiver as well?
It depends on what you think of Peyton O'Leary. Like, if that guy is going to be a guy who you can count on for 30 catches, then I don't think so. Especially because Colson Loveland can split out wide. And I hope to see that quite a bit this year. And then you got Donovan Edwards.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, you got a pretty good receiving core, and then you have two of the best hybrid players in America. So I don't necessarily think they need to find anybody in the portal at that spot.
100% agree. And I think that Peyton O'Leary will catch 30 plus balls this year. And I think we're fine at the wide receiver spot, particularly when you've got tight ends who can mimic wide receivers, and when you've got a running back who is you want to throw the ball to also. So I
just can't imagine getting someone out of the portal who I'd rather line up outside than Colson Loveland or Donovan Edwards. I want the max number of snaps for both those guys. It's possible.
And to a degree, you don't want to commit recruit over some of your younger guys right now because they're on their way up. So Darius Clemens, that guy, that's a lot of talent right there. We haven't seen a guy overthrow him every time he's open, but that he's supposed to be a hit down the road. And I think they're pretty fine at wide receiver, especially given how much Michigan uses their receivers. It's not like we're a 4-wide team, right? So I agree with Brian, right? I would rather see them develop some tight ends. Tight end, I know you got, Barner and you got Loveland, but your next guy down is kind of a fudgy thing right now. If they believe in Hibner,
it's Hibner,
Hibner is the next pure tight end, and then the next guy officially down the list is Bredesen.
We knew that dude could run. That was one of the things said about him coming out of high school. But boy, you really saw it in the spring. And now the turf monster got him. But boy, he turned on the Jets. That was impressive to see.
Yeah,
and you're right. You got to feel good about Michigan's tight end room again this season.
Well, they have Marlon Klein too still in there. We haven't seen a lot of him, but I'm optimistic about him. And I think they have a freshman tight end coming.
They have a couple, Zach Marshall and Deacon Tonielli.
Right.
I think both of them, tight ends at Michigan, don't play as true freshmen unless they're Colson Loveland. Right. That guy was a freak. But I mean, Marshall, you saw him out there at the spring game a whole bunch, and he looked all right. It's just the blocking side of it has to come along. So I don't know if there is a version of Max Bredesen who can actually catch the ball out there. That's the only thing I would look at for tight end.
Yeah.
Well, Bredesen's more of a H-back, fullback type.
Yeah.
And I would hope they would try to lean more into him being a fullback because Michigan has used those pretty well in the past, and I think it's a nice change-up to have.
Yeah. Actually, that's what I would go. I would get some fullback. Just find some guy named Max Stockbaker or something, and just have a pure fullback on the team.
Yeah. Stockbaker is good. I've seen him.
All right, we got to get to a break. We'll be back on the other side with more MGoBlog Roundtable here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
All right, so go through some of these questions. That is Brady Priestcorn.
Yeah, he's a top guy, isn't he? Maybe
he's a top guy. He has offers from everyone, and I think it's Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State for him. Penn State would be the one, at least for me, that I'd be most concerned about. But none of the coaches who were responsible for all that tight end success, other than James Franklin, are still there. So I'm just Michigan has a better tight end case to make with Brady Priestcorn. He's been to Michigan more than any of those schools. He's super tight with Grant Newsom. He just doesn't talk much. You got to go see the dude in order to talk to him. He doesn't do phone interviews, but he's the only guy in that picture, as was pointed out, that hasn't committed yet. But hearing a lot of confidence, but nothing in the way of being imminent like the other guys. They were sure that Blake Frazier was coming. It was just a matter of when. Turned out to be this month. So,
how much more will they do on the offensive line? They've got 4 guys in. I mean,
they'll go 6.
Okay,
6 is the number I heard. So I'm figuring I got a crystal ball in for Jake Granera. Yeah, I think he's going to be in the class. And then you're talking about 4 or 5 guys for one spot. Great place to be in. I mean, you got Max Anderson out there who they're really trending for. You got Brandon Baker, the number 1 offensive lineman in the country, who's coming on an official. You got a couple of other guys that were just in here recently, as a matter of fact. There was an offensive lineman who said Michigan was the favorite for him coming out. He's out of Texas. What the hell is the dude's name?
Uini? Luckily, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Uini? Well, he was the one who put out the edit that made it look like he was committed. And I'm talking about Bennett Warren. Bennett Warren is the guy. Thank you.
Oh, Warren. Okay.
Yeah, Bennett Warren was the guy who came out saying Michigan was the leader. But Michael Uini, he was the dude who put out that it was like a commit graphic and then took it down. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know what that's about. But he is one of the guys that you would throw in that mix where you're talking about maybe 4 or 5 guys for one spot here down the stretch, and likely Sharon being done O-line recruiting by the end of June. That's A1 stuff, because it would free him up to do some to impact some other recruitments. So going through some of these other questions. What do you guys think about this? Cole Cabana.
Yes. Yeah.
What about Cole Cabana?
Can he kick and punt return? And the answer, I think, to that is yes.
Would you do that with him this year?
If he can catch.
No, you got AJ Henning.
No, yeah. If he can catch the ball, I'm going to try and use Cabana too.
Well, I mean, to me, Henning's established, and also Henning is a guy who, I mean, I want to keep him on the roster, and getting him touches is hard, right? Because you get a lot of other options this year.
That's a fair point.
So to me, I want AJ Henning getting those, and also he displayed some real skill there last year. So
yeah,
remember when AJ Henning? Remember when JJ first got on the field? I think it was his first spring game, and he just locked on to AJ Henning because that was the guy he knew.
That was actually what game was it? He was a freshman. I think it was against Western or something.
Yeah. It was. They got in, and all of a sudden, the two of them, because he couldn't see anybody else, and he grew up throwing to AJ Henning, right? Like those guys all were in like a 7-on-7 group together, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe Cabana's a guy too that you do want a red shirt. I don't know. Okay. I mean, they're pretty deep.
I wish we could have gotten. I know he was injured this spring. I wish we could have gotten to see him a bit.
Yeah.
Back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. A couple of things real quick, getting questions from folks, recruiting questions. One of them about Kyan McDonald. We actually are going to be talking about him on the upcoming episode of the Recruiting Insider, so be sure to check that out. That's the Antoine Johnson in the comment section here. Another thing, guys, that we talked about earlier in the show, need to revisit it because we brought it up last week, the possibility of Hunter being lured back to Ann Arbor. With the seriousness that Kansas is showing, there's word out of Kansas that this is who Bill Self wants, and they're not going to be outbid NIL-wise. And while I have no proof, Brian Cook, that is indeed the case, I kind of believe it. I kind of believe that. What say you?
I just, they got a head start on the whole doing that stuff. So, yeah, I think that is unlike. As soon as I saw that he's visiting Kansas, I was like, all right, well, that's probably where he's going to be, which is unfortunate. But Michigan's still looking in the portal, and if they pick up a couple of dudes, I think they're in a good position. And one thing that, there's definitely some Ewing theory potential here, just because, Michigan will upgrade, I think, significantly on defense with Terrace Reed as a starting center. And then it's just, you got to find enough offense from somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, I think Hunter's at Kansas today, in fact. And So my surmise is we'll know pretty quickly. And I also surmise that a lot of what's going on with Michigan in the transfer portal is connected to Hunter. And so if Hunter commits to Kansas, I think there's a good chance that Michigan ends up with Olivier Kamwa.
I hope so. So
Yeah.
interesting thing about Kamwa, I talked to Eric Bossy about him this week, and it was, his take on it from the Tennessee side of things was really interesting. He said the sentiment in Knoxville is that dudes just would rather be a pro, even if it means being an overseas pro, and that college is a fallback option. So, kind of assessing what his market value is from an NIL perspective, and balancing that with what might be the best, sort of college spot for him as far as his game is concerned too. That's important in winning, but that's a fallback option. At least that was the talk coming out of it. Now, is that actually the case, or is that them rationalizing why he's leaving? I don't know which is which, but it was noteworthy to me that they weren't convinced that he was going to be transferring to another school, that they're under the very clear impression that him going pro is a really good possibility.
They could be right. I don't know, but I have a hunch that he may end up in Ann Arbor if
he doesn't go pro.
Yeah, and the Michigan is in a situation right now, if Hunter does go to Kansas or Maryland or wherever, that they're sort of in an awkward spot at the big position, right? They've got Terrace, and they've got
that's it. That's it. And Terrace Reed's the only center on this team.
Right. I think that's
call Trey Jackson the center.
Well, I agree with you, but I mean, if Terrace has 5 fouls or 4 fouls, who plays center? And, yeah, I mean, it's Trey Jackson because that's all they got.
Right.
And so they need another guy in that spot. And I think Kamwa is a good choice because he's primarily a 4, but he could slide to the 5, and it gives them sufficient flexibility at the position. And
I need you fellas to help me out with something, because you deal with the Michigan fan base just as much as I do, right? And so there's this weird vibe out there about Hunter that I'm just not. And admittedly, I think people know that's my dude. I like Hunter. Maybe I have a blind spot, but I see this all the time, where people like, you got Michigan fans, we don't want him back. Good riddance. Hunter said, like this dude in here just said Hunter is trash, and that is like not an anomaly. Where is all this Hunter hate coming from? Is it just because the dude went in the portal? What is that all about? I don't get why Michigan fans are so all on this dude's head like that.
Yeah, that's why, right? He's been at the university for 3 years. And he wants to be the face of the program. And then before his senior year, he's like, peace out. Like, I get that. I'm a little cheesed off by it too. I'm not going to diss the guy publicly, but it's like, you had an opportunity to be a 4-year player at this university and really kind of go down with a legacy. And now you're going to be a mercenary at Kansas. And I can't, it's 2023. I understand how the world works. But people who are upset about that, I understand that too.
What you just said is different, though, Brian. I get being upset, but you got people saying he's trash. They're better without him. No. He wasn't that good. That's the part I don't.
I mean, if you come get that message on our message board, that guy gets downvoted 48 times in a heartbeat.
Yeah, like, but there's
fringe.
People break up with girls all the time, and that's what they say, right? It's like, blah, blah, blah.
And at a time where that was being said, it just seemed like the door wasn't completely shut on the return. Like, why would you position it like that? Like he's unwanted, even if you feel like the voice of the fans is inconsequential. I think Jim Harbaugh kind of refuted that a bit. He said, hey, when I look at what I'm doing, I want to know what the administration is thinking. I want to know what the fans are thinking. So they pay that kind of stuff.
All right, but you can't look at the fringe of the fans because every fan base is going to have their, the idiot who's going to just get mad online. Now, is this guy
don't
like
talk about Craig like that? That's not nice.
Craig's
Hey,
not online. He doesn't.
I don't even know what it is. I mean, I don't.
That's not true because I see you posting on the message board all the time.
Oh,
CR.
message board, yeah, but
but like that kind of sentiment is you're gonna find that if you go looking for it. But like I said, if that guy posts that on our message board, he's gonna get a gazillion downvotes. Now people are, because I think what happens, you see you have a guy like Hunter, and you're like ready to give him that legacy. You're ready to be like, okay, one's going up in the rafters, right? This is the guy that has just carried our team for years. You have a dismal season, and he was literally at the center of that. Where I know it wasn't all his fault, but people were kind of dogging him a little bit during the year. And then he leaves. So, I mean, what you've done is you were prepared to give him this legacy. You were prepared to think of him as like, the guy who defined his era. And then he goes and leaves to Kansas. Understandable. You can do that. But it's disappointing to people in a way that is going to make the fringe people who are disappointed act like they just got dumped.
yeah, I mean, here's the deal, and it's why I have no frustration with Hunter at all. I mean, he probably does not have an NBA career. I mean, I've been watching the playoffs, and you see the big guys in the NBA, and they look nothing like Hunter. I mean, they look super athletic. They're super athletic guys who may not be as good as basketball players as Hunter in some limited sense, but they just don't look like him. And the NBA is not going to be interested in Hunter. I'm sad to say, but they're not. And so he's got 2 years to make money. And who can tell him, oh, you shouldn't market yourself to the highest bidder, which I believe is what is happening. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. And who's going to be the highest bidder in the basketball world? Kansas. And that's why I've been saying for a long time now, I thought if Kansas is interested, he's going to go to Kansas. I still think that. And I think he's going to get paid and he deserves to get paid. And so the rest of it, I can't begrudge him that at all. Now, people don't like him because he's a little
he goes out of his way.
He's on the edge.
Liked.
Right. He goes out of his way to not be liked. Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's the point. And so and to a portion of the Michigan fan base, and I don't criticize that portion of the Michigan fan base, they really don't like that very much. So anyway, some of the things that are being said on the posts here are just not. I mean, there was a complaint. One guy said that he brings the ball down too low in the post. Hey, have you ever watched Terrace? I mean, Terrace brings the ball down to his feet. I mean, that's a hard.
I'm just literally, those are YouTube comments, Sam. YouTube comments.
But you see, I mean, I mentioned Hunter, and it just exploded. I mean, he's a lightning rod.
He is.
Like, man, wow. Okay.
Did you know the first thing about YouTube comments?
Right. They're definitely all about this Hunter topic. But Craig, I know you said that there were some developments or that you wanted to kind of touch on hockey wise before we get out of here.
Well, just I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that one. But it wasn't clear to me about Garrett Shifsky, who was a good player at Waterloo, and it looks like he will be at Michigan this year, as far as I can tell. And he's a nice player to go with the guy we talked about last week, Moldenauer. If Fantilli stays, and he's young, and depending on who he gets drafted by, I think there's some chance Fantilli will stay. You have a really sweet line with him and Brindley and perhaps Moldenauer, because they played together at the Chicago Steel and very effectively. And so you have a dynamite first line, and you have a potentially dynamite second line with McGroarty, Nazer, and perhaps Duke. I don't know what you do with Hallam. He's a little fast to play perhaps with TJ Hughes on the third line. How that works together, I don't know. But to me, I'm looking at it and I say, yeah. And with if Seamus Casey stays, I think he will. I like the recruit, or the guy they got out of the portal. Davis
Yeah.
Warren.
We didn't talk
So-
about him. That's a
Yeah.
great one to
Yeah.
touch on. How big of an addition is that, Brian?
I mean, he's a top pairing defenseman for BC, a guy who was with the national team not last year, as a recruit,
Couple years
6th round
ago.
pick. He'll be a super senior this year, a guy with a ton of college experience, and an ideal guy to pair. An ideal guy to pair with either Seamus Casey or Ethan Edwards, who are more offensive minded. So if you get Truscott back, looks like you will, then that makes your first two pairings a really appealing set of veteran drafted stay-at-home defensemen and two of the more dynamic guys in college hockey. Now, neither of those guys is probably going to be Luke Hughes, but what we saw from Seamus Casey against Quinnipiac is like, all right, let him cook. So I feel like, then you got to figure out your third pairing, but you get Karanen back. So if you got 5 or 6 spots on defense that feel pretty good, then I think that's pretty good going into the season. And then, it's all about like, does Michigan get the Hobie Baker winner back?
Yeah.
Which I'm still not saying is likely, but I'm saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance. I called him Davis Warren. It's Marshall Warren. Sorry.
I know who you are.
And he actually can score a little bit. And so I would see most likely Casey and Truscott together.
Amen.
And Warren with Edwards, perhaps. And then I know the program likes Druskinis a whole lot.
Let me tell you something. You know what jumped out to me, other than they were saying like he's a top pairing defenseman.
Yeah.
He is a captain of a hockey program in Boston, and he's black. That just, I was like, man, that dude definitely brings something to the table to your team. I wanted to.
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. I was very happy to see that.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on real quick on the way out a little Michigan baseball because I think you guys know this, man. Eric Bakich. You talk about gut punches that we felt as many Michigan baseball fan felt, but it's especially on this show. I mean, the rise and the ride with Eric, and he was such a good dude, and in on the vision, and hell, I mean, he even turned him on to one of his topic. I'm like, we were invested in that program. So when he left, admittedly, I was like, man, whoever comes next, it's just gonna be really, really hard for that dude to try to win hearts and minds right away. Craig, I like Tracy Smith, man. I think he gets it. I think he gets this league. I think there is still some roster holes that he's gonna have to fill in the offseason. You hope he can get Obertop back this year, but man, just watching the way that he's coached this team thus far, kind of finding strengths of guys, settling, figuring out the pitching staff. I like what we've seen and heard from Tracy Smith so far. I know they're 19-16, but big series coming up with Michigan State.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I was also a big Bakich fan, but I like Tracy Smith. He inherited no pitching, one guy basically.
I don't have
and he's had to piece together, a pitching staff with odds and ends, and he's gotten some good pitching out of Renault, and he's managed somehow to keep it afloat. And he'll bring pitchers in. I think he's proven he's a pretty good recruiter. He was at Indiana, and that pitching staff will get better. He has a team this year that'll hit, and that's even without Obertop, who was probably their best hitter. So is there
any update you heard? I should ask.
I haven't heard nothing. I've heard nothing. So I don't know.
I mean, the hope with Smith was that you're going to get the Indiana version of him, not the ASU version. And so far, he looks kind of like the Indiana. We kind of look like Indiana did, right? Where it's just they're missing some pieces, but they chug along. They get some timely hitting, and they recruit well for a Big Ten team. You just got to remember, in this sport, we are mid-major. We're not.
Yeah, I learned that lesson from you guys. You gave me the dose of reality, and I was like, hey, just pay the man. Hey, baseball coach of the country, and you're like, no, Sam, that's not how it works in baseball. That's not how it works in Big Ten baseball. You cannot do that. Of course, you guys were you were right about that. You're right about
Well,
that.
I'm hoping. I mean, before Bakich left, he was pushing a new model for baseball that would actually have him play in the summer. And one of the key parts of it is he was pointing out that even in places like Mississippi State, their attendance goes up considerably in the warmer months. So, in February and March when they're playing, people aren't going to those games as much. And baseball is a sport that can make money. And I'm just hoping that he's still interested in that now that he's at Clemson and hasn't just dropped it.
Yeah, I mean, stunning information. People are more likely to watch baseball games when it's warm than when it's 25 degrees. And somehow the Big Ten has never figured that out. I mean, to me, it's a complete freaking mystery.
It's not the Big Ten driving it. There's more baseball schools in the South, and so when they go to vote, should we move up the season another week? Should we? The question is really, do we allow a tournament to start? Because they're all tournaments down there at that time. So, do we allow another tournament to go further, earlier into February? And they always vote yes, because that's how a UCF can be a much bigger program than a Michigan.
Well, I think, UCF can be a big program regardless if they play when the game's supposed to be played, which is the summer. And if I'm the Big Ten and others and the MAC and other teams in the Northeast and the Midwest, I'm saying the hell with you. We're not going to let you guys drive the boat. We're driving the boat. We can make money. We can play with wooden bats. We can play when it's hot. We can sell beer and sayonara. And they'll fall in line because they won't have a choice.
All right, folks, we got to get out of here. Remember, if you're in the market for a new vehicle, get on board with Brighton Ford. The 2022 F-150 blowout sale is going on right now. You can get into one for as low as $394 a month with $3,500 down, or a 2023 Edge for as low as $279 a month. Also, with only $3,500 down, out at Brighton Ford. Get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. We'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of the University of Michigan Sports.